The first time she called me a villain, it wasn't in private. It wasn't whispered in anger or typed in a text message she could later delete. It was under the brutal honesty of daylight, in front of half the town, with cameras rolling and people watching like they were waiting for a public execution. And somehow, the worst part wasn't the accusation. It was the look in her eyes when she said it, like she truly believed I had destroyed something sacred. That was the moment my world cracked open, not with a scream, but with a silence so loud I could barely breathe. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Stories like this remind us that even villains might just be misunderstood heroes in disguise. My name is Ayan Mirza, and until that afternoon, I thought I was building something good. I had returned to my hometown of Seabrook Heights after 7 years away, armed with a business degree, a restless ambition, and a plan to renovate the abandoned Harborview Community Center into a tech hub for local kids. I remembered what it felt like to grow up there with nothing but cracked basketball courts and fading murals. I remembered dreaming of escape. I wanted to give kids a reason to dream bigger without having to leave. But dreams, I learned, can look like destruction from the outside. The Harborview Community Center wasn't just brick and concrete. It was history. It was bake sales and summer fairs and old photographs lining the hallway. And for Alara Quinn, it was her mother's legacy. Her mother had run that center for 25 years before cancer took her. Alara had inherited not just the building but the responsibility, the memories, and the silent promise to protect it. So when she saw me standing beside city officials in broad daylight, gesturing toward blueprints and renovation plans, she didn't see opportunity. She saw betrayal. The town meeting that day was supposed to be routine. Sunlight poured through the dusty windows, illuminating floating particles in the air like tiny suspended verdicts. The mayor cleared his throat, talked about modernization, about grants and funding, about how Seabrook Heights needed to move forward. I spoke about computer labs, coding workshops, scholarships. I spoke with passion. I believed every word. But when Alara stood up, her voice cut through the room sharper than any statistic I had presented. She said I was tearing down the only place that still felt like home. She said I was replacing heart with hardware. She said I was the villain in a story no one asked to be rewritten. And the crowd murmured, uncertain, swaying like wheat in a confused wind. In that moment, I realized something devastating. Good intentions don't always translate into good optics. After that meeting, the days felt longer than usual. I walked through town under the open, relentless sun and felt eyes on me from every shop window. Children who used to wave now hesitated. The local newspaper ran a headline that painted me as an outsider trying to erase tradition. I tried to tell myself it was temporary, that progress always faced resistance. But at night, when daylight faded and doubt grew louder, I wondered if I had miscalculated everything. Alara and I had grown up 2 streets apart. As kids, we had built sandcastles on the shoreline and raced bicycles down Maple Avenue. Back then, she used to call me stubborn. Now she called me heartless. I told myself she was blinded by grief, that her attachment to the past was clouding her vision. But deep down, I knew I had failed to speak to her before presenting my plans publicly. I had underestimated the emotional weight of that building. And that was my first mistake. One afternoon, determined to understand what I was fighting against, I walked into the community center alone. It was still morning, the sun high and generous. Dust-covered chairs were stacked against the walls. A faded banner from a decade-old fundraiser hung crookedly above the stage. I ran my fingers across a bulletin board filled with photographs. There was Alara at 12, smiling beside her mother. There were children holding handmade trophies. There were moments frozen in time that no renovation could replicate. That was when I heard her footsteps behind me. She didn't yell this time. She didn't accuse. She simply stood there, arms crossed, watching me like she was waiting for me to finally see what she saw. The daylight streaming through the windows illuminated her face, revealing exhaustion beneath her defiance. Grief had sharpened her edges, but it had also hollowed her out. I tried to explain again. I told her I wasn't demolishing the center completely. I wanted to preserve the main hall, restore the stage, keep the murals. I wanted to blend the old with the new. But every word sounded like negotiation instead of empathy. She told me her mother had fought for years to keep that place alive without turning it into something unrecognizable. She said progress didn't have to mean erasure. She said I should have come to her first. And she was right. The turning point didn't come with a dramatic revelation. It came with a small, quiet realization under the warmth of afternoon light. I had been so focused on saving the town's future that I forgot to honor its past. I asked her to show me the parts of the building that mattered most. We spent hours walking through every room. She told me stories about her mother organizing food drives and hosting art classes. She showed me the scuffed floorboards where children had learned to dance. I listened, not to respond, not to defend, but to understand. In the days that followed, something shifted. We began meeting in broad daylight, sitting on the front steps of the center with notebooks and revised blueprints. The townspeople watched cautiously. Some still saw conflict. But slowly, collaboration replaced confrontation. We agreed to keep the original facade, to restore the community hall as a multi-purpose space, to create a memorial wall dedicated to her mother. The tech labs would be built in the unused annex instead of replacing the heart of the building. It wasn't easy. Funding wavered. Contractors complained. The mayor questioned delays. And every time obstacles rose, I saw fear flicker across Alara's face, fear that compromise would lead to loss. I fought my own battles too, wrestling with pride and the sting of being misunderstood. But each challenge forced us to communicate better. To trust. To admit when we were wrong. One bright morning, months into the renovation, we hosted an open house to show the town our progress. The main hall gleamed with restored wood and fresh paint, but the old photographs remained. The new computer lab buzzed with donated equipment, sunlight reflecting off screens that promised possibility. Children ran from room to room, their laughter echoing through spaces that felt both familiar and renewed. I stood near the entrance, watching the crowd. Some nodded approvingly. Others looked thoughtful. It wasn't unanimous acceptance, but it was something better, hope. Then I saw Alara weaving through the people, her expression unreadable. She stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see tears threatening to spill. For a moment, the noise around us faded. The town, the politics, the headlines, they all dissolved into the warmth of that day. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, not as an enemy or a threat, but as the boy who once built sandcastles beside her. And then she said the words that unraveled everything inside me. She said she had called me a villain because she was scared. She said she thought fighting me was the only way to protect what she loved. She said she was tired of fighting. And before I could process it, before I could prepare myself for forgiveness, she kissed me. It wasn't dramatic or theatrical. It was soft and trembling, like a truce sealed not by victory but by vulnerability. Sunlight wrapped around us, warm and unapologetic. I felt the weight I had been carrying for months lift, replaced by something fragile and new. When she pulled back, her voice was barely steady. She said she just wanted the fighting to stop. In that kiss was an apology, but also an acknowledgement. We had both been wrong. We had both let fear speak louder than trust. But we had also chosen to listen before it was too late. The renovation was completed by the end of summer. The Harborview Center reopened under a new name that honored both tradition and transformation. Children filled the halls again. Workshops ran alongside dance classes. Technology coexisted with storytelling nights. The memorial wall to her mother became the most visited spot in the building, a reminder that progress rooted in respect can bloom without destroying what came before. Alara and I didn't magically solve every disagreement. We argued about paint colors, about budget allocations, about event schedules. But our arguments no longer felt like wars. They felt like conversations between two people who understood that love and legacy can share the same space. Looking back, I realize being called a villain forced me to confront my blind spots. It humbled me. It taught me that intentions mean little without empathy. And sometimes, the people who fight is the hardest are the ones who care the deepest. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more people who might need a reminder that conflict doesn't have to end in ruin. And before we close, I have a special request. Comment the word peace if you believe that understanding is stronger than pride. Because in the brightest light of day, when accusations echo and emotions run high, it's easy to label someone a villain. It's harder to look closer, to listen longer, to risk forgiveness. But sometimes, all it takes to change the story is the courage to stop fighting, and the willingness to see each other clearly in the light.